Rashak Prime was a world of order and discipline, its surface a seamless mix of vast military academies and brutal training grounds. It was the hub of the Galactic Alliance's interstellar defense force, where cadets from every member species were forged into warriors. The planet's most infamous institution, the Crucible of Combat, was the epitome of merciless training, and only the galaxy's best survived its rigors. The arrival of a new species, humans, had stirred curiosity and skepticism among the Alliance's ranks. Earth, recently categorized as a death world, had gained a reputation for its extreme environments, resilient species, and unpredictable evolutionary paths. Among the fresh recruits at the Crucible was Cadet Jason "Jace" Walker. A representative of this newfound race, Jace's unassuming demeanor and relaxed attitude hid the fact that he was the top performer in Earth's pre-training assessments. Jace's entrance onto the training grounds was met with mixed reactions. The towering reptilian Krog, known for their brute strength, found his casual stride amusing. "You won't last an hour, pink skin," sneered Krog, looming over him. "An hour might be all I need," Jace replied with a grin, his voice light but unwavering. The Krog's laughter echoed across the grounds, drawing the attention of others. Jace remained unfazed, adjusting his pack and stepping into the looming shadow of the Crucible's primary training facility. There, the infamous drill sergeant Olgarn waited. Olgarn, a four-armed insectoid Grashan, was legendary for breaking even the hardiest of recruits. His multifaceted eyes narrowed as he regarded the human. "So this is the Deathworldler," Olgarn buzzed, his mandibles clicking. "You'll collapse like the rest of your squishy kind." "Let's find out, sir," Jace said with an easy salute. The first trial was the Grinder, a week-long endurance course designed to push recruits to their limits. The Grinder consisted of brutal 100-kilometer marches through toxic swamps, puzzles requiring intense focus, and combat scenarios with simulated predators. Each section was timed and monitored. Failure wasn't uncommon, and even the galaxy's elite recruits rarely finished within the allotted time. Jace, however, seemed to operate on a different wavelength. From the outset, he observed rather than reacted. While other recruits struggled to wade through the swamp's treacherous terrain, Jace scanned the surroundings, locating a hidden path that allowed him to maintain a steady pace. When faced with simulated predators, most recruits engaged in panicked combat, often suffering simulated injuries. Jace, on the other hand, set traps or lured the predators into fighting each other. His resourcefulness baffled both his fellow cadets and the observing instructors. By the end of the first day, Jace had achieved milestones set for the midweek mark. By the second day, he had completed challenges designed to take 5 days. While others stumbled and faltered, Jace maintained a calm, measured pace, his strategies minimizing effort while maximizing results. His progress began to attract attention in the command center, where Drill Sergeant Olgarn and his peers monitored recruits through an array of holographic displays. "The humans bypassing our obstacles," one instructor muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. "He's not even breaking a sweat." "Is exploiting flaws in the design," Olgarn snapped, though his tone betrayed his unease. "This isn't natural." The final stage of the Grinder was the Maze of Torment, a dynamic labyrinth filled with shifting walls, hidden traps, and combat trials. No recruit had completed it in less than 48 hours. Jace entered the maze on the evening of the second day. By dawn, he emerged, untouched and smiling, while the labyrinth still twisted and shifted behind him. Olgarn's mandibles clicked furiously as he reviewed the data. Jace's efficiency was undeniable. He hadn't brute-forced his way through the maze like many recruits attempted. Instead, he'd anticipated its shifts, avoided its traps, and outsmarted its challenges. The drill sergeant slammed a clawed hand against the console. This is unprecedented," he growled. Jace's return to the barracks was similarly uneventful. While others staggered back in exhaustion, he sauntered in, barely winded. To his fellow recruits, his success was both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. Krog, who had mocked him on the first day, now avoided his gaze. Others whispered about the human's uncanny abilities, their voices tinged with a mix of admiration and fear. The command center was in turmoil. Ulgarn, alongside other drill sergeants and senior instructors, dissected every second of Jace's performance. Screens displayed his progress through the grinder, annotated with data highlighting his unorthodox solutions and almost inhuman efficiency. "Is not just better," said Drill Sergeant Drakal, a towering Vorzan known for his no-nonsense demeanor. "He's dismantling the course. If this is what Deathworlders are capable of." He trailed off, his expression dark. "We need to adapt," another instructor interjected. "This course isn't designed for that." "Adapt," Ulgarn snapped. "We've already pushed the limits. 2 Krog recruits were hospitalized from exhaustion. If we make it any harder, we'll break them." The room fell silent as they reviewed the final footage of Jace's maze run. His movements were precise, almost mechanical. He had treated the labyrinth not as a challenge to overcome, but as a puzzle to be solved. Where others panicked, Jace thrived. "We're not dealing with an ordinary Deathworlder," Ulgarn finally said, his voice low. "If Earth's population is anything like this, Walker, the Alliance is woefully unprepared." Arguments erupted once more. Suggestions ranged from isolating Jace to rewriting the course entirely. Some even proposed downplaying his achievements to prevent morale issues among the other recruits. But one thing was clear. Jace Walker's performance had shattered their confidence in the Crucible's infallibility. Meanwhile, Jace remained oblivious to the chaos he had caused. To him, the grinder had been straightforward, almost enjoyable. As he lounged on his bunk, he couldn't help but wonder what other challenges the Crucible had in store. Whatever they were, he was ready. Unbeknownst to him, the Galactic Alliance's finest minds were already scrambling to rewrite their playbook, desperate to understand the human anomaly they had unwittingly unleashed into their ranks. The electronic programming began. Rashak Prime was alive with the hum of machinery and the clamor of discipline. The Galactic Alliance's elite training grounds, spread across its surface, represented the pinnacle of military rigor. It was here that the galaxy's finest warriors were forged, tested, and perfected. Yet, as Cadet Jason J.C. Walker, the lone human recruit, stood in the shadow of the crucible of combat, the infamous Academy's instructors were unaware they were on the verge of an unsettling revelation. The human enigma. Jace's arrival was understated, almost anticlimactic compared to the grandiose debuts of other recruits. He carried himself with the kind of calm confidence that puzzled his peers. While the towering Krog, with their scaled hides and lumbering might, thumped their chests, and the sleek feline Virine prowled with predatory grace, Jace simply observed. He carried no outward signs of exceptional ability. That made the shock of his performance all the more profound. The grinder, the first major trial of the Crucible, was designed to exhaust and overwhelm. Most cadets faced their limits within hours, spanning 100 kilometers of merciless terrain, a gauntlet of physical endurance, mental acumen, and survival instincts awaited. Toxic swamps, simulated predator attacks, complex puzzles, and more filled the week-long ordeal. Jace approached the grinder like a puzzle to be solved. Where others fought against the swamp's clinging mire, Jace spotted patterns in the terrain, finding a path of firmer ground that others had overlooked. Instead of exhausting himself in combat with the predatory constructs, he used their behaviors against them, leading one into an ambush by another. Every challenge that brought recruits to their knees seemed to offer him an opportunity to excel. By the end of the first day, Jace had covered ground meant to take 3. By the second day, his name was being whispered across the barracks. By the third, the command center was in uproar. Command center chaos. Drill Sergeant Olgarn had always been a symbol of unyielding authority, but watching Jace's progress tested his composure. The insectoid Gratian's 4 arms operated various consoles as his compound eyes tracked holograms of the course. Around him, other drill sergeants and instructors murmured in disbelief. "Look at this segment," Olgarn hissed, highlighting footage of Jace dismantling a predator simulation. The construct, a towering 6-legged beast, had been designed to mimic a relentless apex predator. Instead of engaging it head-on, Jace had lured it into a narrow gorge and collapsed a rock formation onto it. That's not how the scenario was supposed to be solved. "He's bypassing the intended solutions," growled Drill Sergeant Drakal, a Vorzon whose massive frame was as intimidating as his voice. "Is it luck? Instinct?" "That's a good point. Just before you leave the locked room, instantly start to lift for a moment, as though to inspect what you've just done." "Neither," Olgren replied, mandibles clicking in irritation. "It's strategy. He's solving the course, not enduring it." The room fell silent as they watched Jace navigate a swamp section that had claimed 3 recruits earlier in the day. While others floundered, their suits clogged with viscous mud, Jace's keen observation had led him to a path of submerged rocks. His movements were efficient, almost methodical. "He's treating this like a game," murmured an instructor, her voice tinged with unease. "And he's winning," Olgarn growled. The Maze of Torment. The Grinder's finale, the Maze of Torment, was infamous even among the Crucible's harsh trials. An ever-shifting labyrinth of traps, shifting walls, and combat scenarios. It was designed to test a recruit's physical and mental limits. Finishing it in under 48 hours was a feat of legend. Jace entered the maze on the second evening, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. The instructors watched with a mix of fascination and dread. Within the maze, walls shifted unpredictably, trapping recruits in dead ends or forcing them into grueling combat against simulated foes. Psychological stressors compounded the difficulty, inducing paranoia and fatigue. Jace's approach, however, was almost surgical. He mapped the maze's patterns with uncanny precision, predicting wall shifts and avoiding traps. Simulated enemies that caught others off guard found themselves outmaneuvered. Even the maze's psychological tests seemed to falter against him. The most telling moment came when Jace faced the Void Chamber, a section designed to isolate recruits and prey on their deepest fears. Instructors watched, expecting hesitation or breakdown. Instead, Jace sat cross-legged in the chamber's center, closed his eyes, and seemed to meditate. The timer ticked by, and the maze adjusted, releasing him when it failed to induce any reaction. This isn't possible," Olgarn muttered, as Jace exited the maze in under 2 hours. "No one's—" "But he did," Drakal said, his growl subdued. "What does this mean for the Crucible, for the Alliance?" Olgarn's mandibles twitched. "It means we're unprepared. If he's a representative of Deathworlders—" He trailed off, his compound eyes narrowing. "We need to reassess everything." The recruit's perspective. Unaware of the chaos unfolding in the command center, Jace returned to the barracks. His fellow recruits avoided his gaze. Some whispered in awe, others in suspicion. Krog, the towering reptilian who had mocked him on the first day, now watched him warily. Jace settled onto his bunk, his demeanor as calm as ever. To him, the grinder had been an engaging challenge, one that required resourcefulness rather than brute force. He couldn't understand why others found it so grueling. The barracks grew quiet as the other recruits settled in for the night. Jace leaned back, staring at the ceiling, his mind already contemplating the next set of trials. Whatever the Crucible threw at him, he was confident he'd be ready. The Galactic Alliance in turmoil. As Jace rested, the Crucible's leadership convened in an emergency meeting. Footage of Jace's performance played on a loop, annotated with detailed analysis. The consensus was clear. Jace hadn't cheated. His results were legitimate, his methods unorthodox but effective. "We've underestimated Deathworlders," Ulgarn said, addressing the room. "Walker's performance isn't just exceptional, it's paradigm-shifting. If his abilities are representative of his species, we're dealing with a level of adaptability we've never accounted for." "The Crucible wasn't designed for recruits like him," an instructor argued. "Our training methods assume a baseline of biological and psychological limits. Deathworlders, they defy those limits." "So what do we do?" Drakal asked. "Rewrite the courses? Raise the standards?" "If we raise the standards, we risk breaking recruits from non-Deathworld species," Ulgarn replied. "The Krog and Vorzan barely meet the current benchmarks. Pushing further could decimate our ranks." Finally, Wallace asked. The room fell into a tense silence. The implications were clear. Jace's success had exposed flaws not just in the Crucible's design, but in the Alliance's understanding of its member species. "We need to study him," Ulgarn finally said. "Understand his thought processes, his physiology, his psychology. This isn't just about Walker, it's about what humanity represents." The decision was unanimous. Jace Walker's presence in the Crucible had become more than a test of his abilities. It was now a test of the Galactic Alliance's capacity to adapt to a new and potentially game-changing ally. The dawn over Grashak Prime brought little light to the dense, stormy atmosphere. In the sprawling crucible of combat, the galaxy's most intense training facility, the focus had shifted entirely to Cadet Jason "Jace" Walker. The human recruit from Earth had accomplished feats that had thrown the entire Galactic Alliance into a frenzy. His completion of the Grinder, a week-long trial in under 2 days, and the Maze of Torment in record-shattering time had brought admiration, confusion, and, most alarmingly, fear. While Jace slept soundly in the barracks, a storm of another kind brewed in the Crucible's command center. Screens lit up with footage of his performance. Lines of data scrolled endlessly as analysts worked overtime to deconstruct every decision he made. The instructors and drill sergeants, who usually exuded unshakable authority, found themselves unnerved, reluctant. Unprecedented analysis. Drill Sergeant Ulgarn's compound eyes scanned a 3-dimensional projection of Jace's maze run for the 3rd time that morning. Each step, each decision, and every encounter had been recorded and dissected. What the Groshan officer saw defied logic. "Play the Void Chamber sequence again," Ulgarn hissed, his forearms gesturing sharply at the display controls. The holographic projection replayed Jace entering the chamber, a circular, pitch-black room designed to isolate and terrify recruits. For most, the Void Chamber was the breaking point. It projected fears, memories, and subconscious doubts. Jace, however, had sat down cross-legged in the middle of the room and closed his eyes. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Faith had barely slept when Jace turned to print off his reversion triangle and then place it on the console. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then the program malfunctioned. The fear stimuli, calibrated to adapt dynamically to a recruit's psyche, overloaded and shut down. Jace had left the chamber with a calm smile, completely unaffected. "He broke the system," murmured an instructor, her voice tinged with awe and dread. "That's not supposed to happen." "It wasn't the system," Ulgarn corrected sharply. "He broke the algorithm. His brain operates in a way we didn't anticipate." Drakal, the hulking Vorzan drill sergeant, growled low in his throat. A fluke, perhaps. Humans are still new to the Alliance. Maybe this one is an outlier. Outlier or not, Olgarn snapped. We're dealing with an unpredictable element. If this cadet represents even a fraction of his species' potential, the Alliance's entire training doctrine is obsolete. The room fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled instructors. The Crucible had long been regarded as the ultimate equalizer, its brutal tests leveling the playing field among recruits of vastly different physiologies and cultures. Jace's performance shattered that illusion. The first test subject. In a sterile laboratory deep within the Crucible's complex, a group of scientists and xenobiologists prepared for their first detailed examination of Jace. The Alliance had strict protocols against invasive tests on cadets, but the urgency of the situation pushed those boundaries. Dr. Voltris, a Viren xenobiologist with sleek, furred features, led the team. She reviewed the data gathered from Jace's performance as assistants prepared non-invasive scanners and neural activity monitors. "Is resting now," Valtris said, glancing at a live feed of Jace reclining in the barracks. "We'll conduct the initial tests while he sleeps. Minimal interference." "So, what are you expecting to find?" asked her assistant, a bright-skinned aquatic Zoran. "Patterns," Valtris replied. "Human neurology, physiology, anything that might explain how he accomplished what he did." The scans began. Neuroimaging revealed brainwave activity more dynamic than anything the team had seen before. Jace's brain oscillated between states of hyperfocus and rest at a pace far faster than other species. His metabolic systems displayed an uncanny efficiency, optimizing energy usage in ways that defied established biological principles. "This isn't just adaptability," Valtris murmured. "This is evolution on overdrive." The team exchanged uneasy glances. The data suggested that humans weren't just surviving on their so-called Deathworld. They were thriving and developing capabilities that might rival even the most advanced species in the galaxy. Jace's awakening. Jace woke early, as was his habit, to find the barracks unusually quiet. The other recruits, wary of him after his grinder performance, kept their distance. Krog, the reptilian who had mocked him on the first day, avoided eye contact altogether. Jace shrugged off the tension, focusing instead on his own training routine. After a quick stretch, he made his way to the training grounds, where he found Drill Sergeant Olgarn waiting. "Walker," Olgarn said, his mandibles clicking, "you're being reassigned for today." "Concentrate, team," Ruby said. "Stay put." Jace raised an eyebrow. "Reassigned? To what, sir?" "A specialized course," Olgarn replied. "Report to Simulation Deck Theta. Now." Jace nodded and jogged off, his curiosity piqued. As he entered the simulation deck, he found himself alone in a cavernous room filled with holographic emitters and advanced training modules. The air buzzed with latent energy. "Cadet Walker," a disembodied voice announced, "you are about to undergo a new simulation designed to test the limits of your capabilities. Begin when ready." The room shifted. Suddenly, Jace was standing in a dense jungle, the sounds of alien wildlife echoing around him. A timer appeared in his vision, a countdown. For one moment, Jace thought the timer had failed. Then he heard the entire dome turn on its activators. The first challenge was immediate. A pack of simulated predators burst from the underbrush. Jace reacted instinctively, his movements fluid as he evaded their attacks. He used the environment to his advantage, leading the creatures into traps he set on the fly. The predators fell one by one, their forms dissolving into static. The next phase began without pause. An avalanche roared down a nearby mountain, forcing Jace to navigate a treacherous ascent. He climbed with precision, analyzing the shifting terrain and predicting safe paths before they crumbled beneath him. The simulation escalated, throwing combatants, puzzles, and environmental hazards at him in rapid succession. Jace's mind worked at a breakneck pace, adapting to each scenario with an ease that bordered on uncanny. By the time the final phase ended, Jace stood unscathed, his breathing steady despite the simulation's intensity. The room returned to its neutral state. Drill Sergeant Olgarn entered, his expression unreadable. "Well?" Jace asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "How did I do?" Olgarn didn't respond immediately. He studied Jace for a long moment before finally speaking. "You've exceeded every metric," he said. "And that is what concerns us. The bigger picture." In the Crucible's High Council chamber, senior officials from the Galactic Alliance convened to discuss the implications of Jace's performance. Representatives from dozens of species, their holographic forms flickering in the dim light, filled the room. "This human cadet represents a potential shift in our understanding of sentient evolution," Olgarn began, addressing the assembly. "His performance in the Crucible is not an anomaly. It's a warning." The representative from the Talric, a cerebral species with bulbous craniums, leaned forward. "A warning of what exactly?" "Adaptability," Olgarn replied. "Humans are not bound by the same limitations as other species. Their capacity to learn, to strategize, and to thrive under extreme conditions surpasses anything we've encountered." "Are you suggesting they're a threat?" asked the Krog delegate, his voice a low rumble.